London, May 19, 1536. The sky over the Tower of London was heavy and gray as dawn crept across the horizon. In the courtyard stood a newly built scaffold of pale wood, assembled quietly through the night. It wasn't the usual raised platform, but a smaller structure, one made for something unusual. A foreign executioner had arrived, carrying not the English axe, but a gleaming sword. The crowd gathered slowly, murmurs rippling through the cold morning air. "Today, a queen will die," someone whispered. "The first in England's history." Anne Boleyn, the woman who defied Rome and forever changed a kingdom, was about to meet her fate. Inside the tower, in the small chamber that had caged her for 17 long days, Anne awoke to her final morning. At 35, she still carried the poise and beauty that had once enchanted the most powerful man in England. Her few remaining ladies-in-waiting, loyal to the end, dressed her carefully. She chose a dark gray mantle lined with fur, and beneath it a crimson bodice, colors that would hide the blood and preserve her dignity. "I hear the executioner is very good." "I have a little neck," Anne said softly, touching her throat. The remark, noted by witnesses, revealed both her courage and a chilling touch of irony. How had Anne Boleyn fallen so far? The daughter of Thomas Boleyn, an ambitious diplomat, and Elizabeth Howard of noble blood, Anne spent her youth in the cultured courts of France. There, she learned refinement, wit, and the charm that later set her apart. When she returned to England around 1522, she wasn't considered a beauty. Her olive skin, dark eyes, and black hair stood in contrast to the fair, golden ideal of the age. But Anne possessed something far rarer, a sharp mind, fluent in languages and skilled in the arts, wrapped in a magnetic presence that drew men like moths to a flame. When King Henry VIII, trapped in a loveless marriage to Catherine of Aragon, and desperate for a male heir, noticed Anne, she refused to play the role her sister Mary once had. "I will not be your concubine," she told him. "If you want my heart and body, you must give me a crown." It was a dangerous challenge, one that would reshape history. For 7 years, from 1526 to 1533, Henry pursued her with a passion that shook England to its core. To make her his queen, he broke from the Catholic Church, named himself Supreme Head of the Church of England, defied both Pope and Emperor, and ignited a revolution. In January 1533, they wed in secret. Anne was already carrying his child, and in September she gave birth, not to the longed-for prince, but to a daughter, the future Queen Elizabeth I. Henry's disappointment was immense, but Anne's influence had already transformed the court. In just 3 years as queen, she championed reform, encouraged scholars, and spread English translations of the Bible, then forbidden. To some, she was a visionary. To others, a manipulative heretic. Her downfall began with her failure to provide a son. After Elizabeth's birth, Anne suffered miscarriages in 1534 and again in 1535, the last of a male child. For a king obsessed with a male heir, such losses were unforgivable. As Henry's affection cooled, enemies gathered, most notably Thomas Cromwell, the king's ruthless chief minister. In April 1536, the storm broke. Cromwell launched an investigation accusing Anne of adultery with 5 men, including her own brother, George Boleyn, and of plotting the king's death. The charges were outrageous, yet deadly. On May 2nd, she was arrested and taken to the Tower of London. Her trial on May 15th was a cruel performance, no defense, no chance to face her accusers, and a jury filled with those who despised her. Still, Anne faced them with grace and intellect. A witness claimed she answered everything so wisely and discreetly that she seemed not a woman, but an angel. But the verdict had been decided long before she spoke. Guilty, the punishment, death by burning. Henry, showing what he called mercy, commuted it to beheading by sword, summoning an expert from France renowned for his swift and precise strikes. Now, back to May 19th, 1536. At 8 o'clock, Anne was told her execution would be delayed until noon. A cruel twist for a woman already prepared to die. She spent those extra hours in prayer, taking communion and whispering again and again, "Lord, have mercy on me." At one moment she swore upon the sacred host, "For my salvation, I am free of the things for which I was condemned. You won't believe what happened next." At noon, the drums began to thunder through the tower grounds. Anne bid farewell to her loyal ladies, gifting each a small token of remembrance, a prayer book, a handkerchief, a piece of jewelry. "Remember me and how I end?" she said softly before being led toward the scaffold. The crowd gathered to witness the execution was smaller than expected, perhaps 1,000 at most. Yet the mood was strangely solemn, even reverent. Many removed their hats as Anne appeared, dressed in gray and crimson, walking with the same grace that had once captivated a king. On the platform, Anne was granted permission to speak. Her final words were measured and deliberate. "Good Christians, I come here to die according to the law, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I am come hither to accuse no man, nor to speak anything of that whereof I am accused. I pray God save the king, and send him long to reign over you. For a gentler, nor a more merciful prince was there never, and to me he was ever a good, a gentle, and sovereign lord. Those who listened would never forget it. Even in the shadow of death, Anne Boleyn neither begged nor blamed. Instead, she played her final role to perfection, a queen protecting her crown and her daughter's future with her last breath. When she finished, Anne removed her mantle and cap, handing them to her weeping ladies. One final act of grace followed. She presented the executioner with a purse of gold coins, payment for what would soon be his grim duty. Then she knelt upright on the scaffold. There was no wooden block, only the cold air and her whispered prayers. "Jesus, receive my soul. O Lord God, have pity on my soul." Following French custom, the executioner used a cruel kindness. "Where is my sword?" he called out, pretending to look around, though the blade was already in his hands. Anne turned her head slightly, and in that instant the sword flashed. With one clean stroke, it was done. A hush fell over the courtyard. The executioner lifted her head by the hair and proclaimed, "So perish the king's enemies." Yet the crowd did not cheer. Instead, uneasy murmurs rippled through them like wind through leaves. Moments later, the thunder of cannon fire echoed. From the tower, a chilling signal that reached Henry VIII at Whitehall, the message was clear: the king was free to marry again. By the very next day, Henry was betrothed to Jane Seymour. 10 days later, they were married. Anne's body was carried away by her grieving attendants. No coffin had been prepared for the former queen. The guards improvised, placing her body and severed head into an old arrow chest. The crude box was borne to the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula within the tower, where she was hastily buried beneath the stone floor, without tombstone or inscription. Soon after, Henry ordered every trace of her erased, portraits destroyed, emblems removed, her name struck from official records. It was a punishment worse than death, the damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. And for centuries, it worked. No authentic portrait of Anne Boleyn survives, but if Henry hoped to erase her legacy, he failed beyond measure. 23. Years after her execution, Anne's daughter Elizabeth ascended the throne. Queen Elizabeth I would rule England for 45 years, ushering in what many still call a golden age. The daughter eclipsed her father in nearly every way, giving the nation the stability he had so desperately sought. In 1876, during restoration work at the Chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, bones were discovered in the place believed to be Anne's grave, the remains of a woman with delicate features and a small skull. Believed to be hers, the bones were finally reburied with dignity. Today, a simple glass marker lies on the Tower lawn where Anne was executed. Each year, admirers lay roses there in quiet remembrance. To many, Anne Boleyn remains more than a tragic figure. She stands as a symbol of injustice, courage, and the cost of power. And the final irony? Her victory came through the very daughter the king once dismissed. Elizabeth I, upon taking the throne, embraced her mother's legacy, even adopting Anne's white falcon emblem. Having learned from her mother's fate, Elizabeth vowed never to marry, declaring herself married to England. The Virgin. Queen built her empire upon the ashes of her mother's sacrifice, a sacrifice that began on that gray May morning in 1536, when a queen walked with unshaken grace to her fate.